This is St Editha's church in the centre of Tamworth. It's the Parish Church, and the graveyard here was filled up in the 19th century, but there's still many graves here you can have a look at. Let's have a little look around. A lot of the graves here are slate, and many of them are lying down like these ones here. It really is rather a lovely graveyard, especially for one right in the town centre. There's lots of dappled shade here and pine trees and beech trees. It's a lovely spot. Under the trees it's hard to read some of the stones because of the moss. You can see that here. We have an Elizabeth here, and I can't make out her surname. We're round at the back of the church now, and you can see even more graves lying down and others standing up. Now that's because in the 1970s, well at the end of the 60s, they started to do works around the church to enlarge a pavement, and ultimately they moved quite a lot of the graves. I'll tell you more about that later. Now this is a view, if you haven't been to Tamworth for a number of years, a view that you won't recognise, because there used to be shops along here and offices, and they've now knocked down a big bunch of them and created Tamworth College. So that's a completely new view from here. It used to be really pretty back in the day, but it's been rather ugly with 60s and 70s developments for quite a while now. So that's a big improvement, I have to say. Here you can see some of the graves that had to be moved. So we've got Lydia Parks, John Atkins Palmer, John Haynes, John Stilt, and most of these graves are slate ones. One of the things I like about these, you know that they're ones that have been laid down later, because you can see the mark at the bottom here where the ground level would have been, and the stonemason's name, which is Mitchell in this case, is written at that level. So let's work our way back around this direction, underneath the shady trees. You can see these slate ones quite clearly here in the sunshine. Affectionate remembrance of Sarah, wife of Thomas White, who died September the 15th, 1849, aged 28. And the daughter of Thomas and Sarah, who died aged 19 in 1968. So she was added on later. More lovely slate graves here, 1823, 1834, 1830. Here's a chap that might be interesting to research. Thomas Bennett, surgeon of this town, and thank you very much to the wind for coming across just at the wrong moment there. He died on June the 24th, 1825, aged 44. How frustrating for a surgeon to have such a short life. I hope it was a good one. I hope he did good things. Benjamin Kirk. Elizabeth and John Harrison. There's lots of graves here that have been laid down as well. I'm being attacked by things blowing in the wind. Let's look back at the church. It's hidden by these trees. It is a lovely church. And there's graves all along this wall as well. 1831, 1825, 1849. I think it was about 1875 that the graveyard filled up. You hear children playing on the other side of the wall, which is kind of nice. I kind of like the idea that people are playing next to these gravestones. It's a very fancy one. In affectionate remembrance of Elizabeth Sadleir, not Sadler, Sadleir, who died in, oh, it's a Latin one. I'll have to work that out later. I can't do that while I'm talking. Samuel Taylor, 1827. William Crawford of Wilmcote. Helen Ferguson, spelt Helon, unusual spelling. Oh, 1818, that's the earliest one I've seen yet. Look back at the church again. Sorry, there's a helicopter going overhead, I don't know if you can hear that. And this is the library that I was mentioning earlier that was built in the 1970s. I think it was opened in 73, something like that. So again, we've got gravestones along here. I apologise for the amount of cutting in this video. It's home from school time and the kids are now using the graveyard as a shortcut. So I really wanted to show you this memorial. It remembers 6 young women who died in 1838 during a fire at the Castle Inn. On the night of the fire, 5 of the servant girls were sharing 3 beds in a room on the top floor, facing Market Street. Mary Garner was the eldest. She was 32 years old and she was a maid. She had only started work at the inn the day before. Harriet Bonner was 23 and she was a cook. Mary Ann Ruth was 22, a waitress. Mary Chatterton was 18, a kitchen maid, and the youngest of the maids was Harriet Bushwell. She was only 15. The 6th girl was 19-year-old barmaid Mary Ann Smith, who was known to her friends as Caroline. Her room was on the opposite side of the passage. You can see all their names here. The landlord, Frederick Webb, and his wife Jane went to bed later. They'd been married less than 2 years and Jane was heavily pregnant with their baby William. 4 days after the fire, there was a huge public funeral here at St Editha's for the 5 Tamworth girls, paid for by the hotel landlord Frederick Webb. A collection was held, and the money from the collection paid for this obelisk. The inscription here says, "This monument was erected by the inhabitants of Tamworth in commemoration of the melancholy and awful deaths of 6 female servants who were hurried from time into eternity by a fire which broke out at the Castle Hotel Inn during the night of November the 2nd, 1838. The 5 Tamworth girls were buried here, but Caroline Smith was buried in Whittington, where her parents lived. And if you pop round the other side, you can see that it tells us that here the remains of Mary Ann Smith were buried at Whittington, and the bodies of the remaining 5 are deposited beneath this tomb. Well, the 5 girls are not buried here anymore. In 1968, parts of the graveyard were cleared to make way for a pavement and eventually for the new library. About 150 bodies were exhumed and reburied at Wigginton Cemetery, with special services conducted by Reverend Albert Edwards. Some more of the graves that are moved over here. Frederick Horton, John Maddox, Anne Marriott, Henry Heath, John Pullin, we've got 1836, 1839, Fanny Deakin, 1855, James Carter Barton, his wife Anne is here, aged 38, and John Pipe Barton, their son, who died in 1814, aged 4, and their daughter Caroline, who died aged 5 weeks in 1820. That's a sad little family. There's another obelisk there. We'll perhaps look at that another day.